Hi guys, Alec, Peirce at the ranch. I don't have a problem this time. I'm just trying to get a machine back together, but I've run into an interesting issue that I thought I'd share with you. As I'm doing various things on my ATVs and UTVs and tractors around here, I constantly am checking on Google, because so many people, on YouTube and Google, so many people like myself and some of you guys too, are working different mechanical and carpentry, but different things, and you're posting your progress, problems you run into, and solutions on YouTube and on Google. And it's fantastic. It's a great resource. Unbelievable. It's something I wish I'd had 30, 40, 50 years ago working on mechanics. And many times we discovered for ourselves what we were doing wrong and what we were doing right. Anyway, so bottom line is I'm replacing the camshaft on my ATV. I have two ATVs I'm working on right now, a 335, in 1999 Polaris 335 Sportsman, and a 2001 Polaris Sportsman 400. They're identical. In most ways identical. There are some differences, one major difference, but the engines themselves are almost identical. Certainly the camshaft itself, the rockers, the valves, all that kind of stuff. All those major things are all identical. Now, one thing I've run into in changing the camshaft, and I'll explain in a minute why I'm changing the camshaft, is what's called the mechanism that's called the anti-compression mechanism. That's what they call it, anti-compression mechanism. Now, this is a mechanism that allows you to easily turn the engine over. The starter motor on these machines is not a big starter motor. It's quite small, and it's 12 volts, and if you get a good battery, it spins pretty well. But if you try to start the engine without pardon me. If you try to start the engine without an anti-compression mechanism, then when the cylinder comes up under full compression, then the starter motor is under a great load. It will often load up and almost stall. So when you turn the starter, generally it should go, and the engine starts. If you do not have the anti-compression mechanism working properly, what happens is it goes, every time the starter motor comes up against the compression, it stalls for a second, and it forces itself past, and back up and stalls again. If you're having that problem, and it's your anti-compression mechanism. Now, the anti-compression mechanism is not a new idea. Polaris has taken it one step further. They've made it automatic. You don't even know it's there. The only time you know the machine has a anti-compression mechanism is when it doesn't work. All of a sudden your starter won't turn the engine over. You probably think it's the battery or the starter or the gears, the flywheel gears. Something is wrong with the starter. It's not. It may be, but often it may not be. It may be the anti-compression mechanism. Now, I have asked several people to just tell me how it works. Nobody's been able to. A lot of people know about the anti-compression mechanism. It is in the service manual. If you have your service manual for your Polaris, it's in there, but it's not described. It doesn't say how it works. It simply tells you this part goes there and that part goes there, and don't do this type of thing. No description. So I'd like to explain what it is. Maybe this would be new. I looked on YouTube and Google, and I couldn't find an explanation of the anti-compression device. Let's see if I can't. It's kind of interesting. Let me share it with you. So if you want to come in a little bit closer, maybe Danny, take a look over here. These are my old parts. This is the old camshaft. I pulled up, very easy to take the camshaft out of these machines. A small cover on one end, a little bigger cover on the other end. Take the rocker cover off, 4 bolts, the rockers come out, camshaft comes out. Very easy. So that's the camshaft that was in there, and this, of course, is the rocker mechanism. You have your 2 journals or fixed supports, and then you have 2 intake rockers. These 2 are intake, and then you have a single exhaust rocker here. Now, it's a single rocker, although it has 2 contact or 2 exhaust valves. So there are 2 valves over here, but they're driven by a single rocker. They both open at the same time, so that's perfectly fine. So that's what that mechanism looks like. I'm going to take 1 minute and show you one more thing while we're there. I'm going to take it apart. So you take off the journal, take off the intake rocker, the exhaust rocker, the other intake rocker. Now, the other journal has a bolt on top. It's kind of neat. You lift that, take that bolt out, and now the rocker pin, what this is called, the rocker pin will come out. You notice the rocker pin has a groove up here, and that rocker pin, to keep it from moving around, you don't want it moving left or right, it's held in place by this bolt. So it's kind of interesting. You don't see these a lot. They're fairly common, but you don't see them a lot, and not many people know what it is. But this is called the dog leg bolt. That's right. Some of you guys know this, of course. That looks like a standard hex bolt, right? But if you look closely, you'll see that the end of this bolt, can you see that, Diana? The end of that bolt has an unthreaded extension that sticks out a little bit. Can you see that? That unthreaded extension. And that unthreaded extension fits down into that groove. You see? So this bolt goes through the journal, like so, and then you put the pin in place, eventually, yeah, and the bolt screws down into that slot. Now you put the bolt down tightly, the proper torque, but it doesn't bottom. So the pin is free to spin, but it can't move left and right. Okay, that's what a dog leg does. Just so you know, I just thought I'd throw that in there, kind of an interesting thing. So there you go. So that's what we have. Now, when I took the cover, there's two covers. There's the left-hand cover on all these machines, from the 335 up to over the 500. They're all exactly the same. On the left-hand side of the machine, the cover looks like this. It's just 3 bolts. Little aluminum cover, 3 bolts, and it's sealed with an O-ring, which is kind of nice. There's no gasket, no goop. It's sealed with an O-ring. You take that off, and you're on your way. Now, when you take this off, you should be looking at the end of the camshaft. It looks a little bit like this. When I took it off, here's what I found. Sitting inside this cover, I found all these bits and pieces. So when I pulled mine off, it looked like this. I took it off and dumped all these pieces of a hunk of metal, a couple of pins, a little spring. Obviously, there's something wrong. All right, so I knew right away what it was. It is my anti-compression mechanism. I also noticed at the same time that this cover is all cracked and bent, naturally enough. I think this machine had been running from the previous owner with all these pieces banging around in there, so it's all cracked to pieces, so I have a new cover to go on there. They're not expensive. So what's all this do? What's this got to do with anti-compression? Well, the anti-compression device is really quite simple. Let's take a look at the new camshaft. Here's my nice new camshaft. I should have white gloves on to handle this, right? Anyway, nice new camshaft. It sits. Here are the 2 journals, one here and one here. Just that simple. Sprocket goes on this end to be driven by the chain. It's driven clockwise this way. So now there's something kind of interesting. This is a big exhaust lobe in the middle. So I'm replacing the exhaust, the rockers as well when I do this. So there's the new rocker. It sits on that wide one, and then there are 2 intake rockers that sit on this side. So as the camshaft rotates, these lobes open and close the rockers. I think you all know how that works. 4-stroke engine's pretty simple. But you might notice on the exhaust, I don't know, can you see that thing? Can you get in there? Can you see that little ball in there? I can't tip it too much, a little bit. Oh,
there we go.
You see how it disappears? Ah, yeah, it disappears. But it doesn't, it's not supposed to disappear. Let me show you. I'm going to take this mechanism here. Okay, you can see that? Now you might recognize this mechanism. How would you recognize it? Well, because all those bits and pieces that I found floating around, there it is. There's that little spring, you see it in there? That was floating around underneath the cam cover. There's that mechanism. And that mechanism simply goes into this hole on the end of the camshaft like that. Now when it goes through, what it does is it pushes that ball out like that, and it holds it there. Now you see the ball won't fall. It stays there sticking out. That's right. And there's a tiny, tiny spring on it. A very, very light spring. In fact, in the service manual, they tell you to don't bend the spring to make it any stronger. It's supposed to be very light. Let me just get it set up here properly so it looks like this. Get the ball out. Sorry. There we go. So here we go. This is what the mechanism looks like. Camshaft, all right. 2 intake lobes, 1 exhaust lobe, journals, spinning away like mad in there, no problem. A little ball sticking up. And you might notice that the ball sticks up underneath the exhaust at the exhaust lobe. And that little ball is held up in that position by this shaft back here. If I move this shaft, can you watch that? If I move this shaft, watch what happens. The ball disappears. Shaft goes back. Move the shaft, the ball disappears just like that. Okay? So this is so simple and it's ingenious. So what happens when you go to start your machine? You turn the key, starter, everything starts to spin, and the camshaft starts to spin too. It spins like this, and around they go, and around they go. Now what happens is, and I'll try to show you exactly what happens here, if we start at this position, the rockers are here. At this particular position, it's pretty much top dead center. And so they're coming around. At this point, the cylinder is traveling upwards, coming up on the compression stroke. You see, the lobes are at the bottom, so the valves are closed. So now the cylinder is coming up on the compression stroke, and it comes up, and it gets to pretty much to the top of the compression stroke right here. That ball is now on top. And what happens? Well, that ball hits the exhaust valve right there and lifts it very, very slightly. So the exhaust valves, the two of them, open very, very slightly. We're just talking a few thousandths of an inch. Just enough to relieve the compression on that compression stroke. So the starter can keep right on going, trying to start your machine. And around it comes, lobes come around, exhaust valves open, comes around, goes down, starts back up on the compression stroke, and when it gets up to the top of the compression stroke, that darn little ball is there, and it very slightly opens the exhaust. Now, you don't want that all the time, though, do you? No, you don't want that ball doing that all the time when the engine's running. So how does this stop? Well, it's really very simple. Now, this mechanism out here, there's a bit of weight to it. It's a little bit heavy, relatively speaking, you see. So when it's turning very, very slowly, it stays where it's supposed to, right there. A little ball sticks up when it's turning slowly. But as you start to speed up, as soon as the engine reaches, I think it's about 200 to 300 RPM, hasn't really started yet. Idle is about 1200 in these machines, but it's starting to spin, it's starting to catch. When it gets to that speed, the weight of this little lever is enough to push it out like so, and the ball falls. You see there? So there it is, normally, ready to start. Around you go, ball is sticking up, engine catches, this is thrown out like so, and the ball drops down, disappears. So in other words, that ball only sticks up to push on the exhaust rocker and open the exhaust valves a little wee bit when the engine is being started. As soon as it starts, this lever goes out and the ball falls. Slick, huh? I loved it. Here's a picture. I'm going to have Kevin put a lot of pictures on here of all these various parts, and you'll see one picture of the exhaust rocker. Now take a little look. I don't know if you can see that there. Can you see that? Can you see the exhaust rocker? You see it's worn a bit. That's why I'm replacing it. But can you see over here on the one side that groove? That's from where the ball hits it. Sure, the ball is offset. Let me just show you here. You see, there's a rocker sitting on the lobe. That's where the ball is offset. So this, in the old one, the ball has jammed or not worked properly, and it's actually cut a groove in the rocker there. Pretty slick, huh? Yeah, I've always liked Polaris machines, and for a variety of reasons. They're not cheap, but they've always been very, very good. And Polaris has always been an innovator. As soon as I finish this, I'm going to start putting this mechanism back together, and hopefully this machine will start up and run smooth as the devil. And there's some information on the what they call the anti-compression, or in the old days what I call the decompression mechanism, decompression lever, we used to call it. Kind of neat, eh? Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Maybe there's something in there. If you have any questions or comments about what I'm doing with my old Polaris machines, let me know. Any tips, I could always use too. I think that's it. Okay, talk to you soon, guys. Got to get busy. I want to get this machine ready for summer. Bye-bye.